Let's bring in Danny Cevallos right now, an attorney who's handled a number of high-profile federal court cases. He is also, fortunately for us, an NBC News legal analyst. Danny, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So the president quickly responded on Twitter yesterday, not surprisingly. He wrote, "Totally clears the president. Thank you. But to be clear, in these documents, individual one is Donald Trump." We know that to be true. And the document from these prosecutors in the Southern District of New York endorses Michael Cohen's claim that Donald Trump directed Cohen to commit felonies, campaign finance violations. So don't these documents say as much about Donald Trump as they do about anybody else?
Let me take you back to the summer when a lot of us still wondered whether or not campaign finance law violations were really a crime that the special counsel or government attorneys would be interested in. And the answer to that question is and was yes in August when Michael Cohen stood in federal court here in New York and pleaded guilty to just that crime. And at the time, he implicated the president in open court. But the question still remained, did the government believe him? And the answer to that question came yesterday. Yes, it does. Yes, it does believe that not only did the president, individual one, know about these payments, which constituted crimes, but that he directed them. And under the basic principles of criminal law, if you order or direct someone to commit a crime, it's just as if you committed the crime yourself.
So then on that note, you think about it, you just kind of touched on this. This whole investigation began really as an effort to determine if there was indeed coordination between the president's team and the Russians during the campaign. So we're learning new details, though. And within the filing, it stated that Cohen revealed, quote, certain discrete Russia-related matters core to its investigation. What can we take away from that?
That there is some there with the Russia investigation. And particularly when you look at Michael Cohen's guilty plea for lying to Congress, that implicates the Russian deal, the Trump deal in Russia, and the fact that they needed the help of Russian officials. The inference you can draw from that is potentially that if they needed this help, and if Russians knew that Trump deceived the American public when he said, "I have no business in Russia," then did the Russians have something to hold over President Trump? Did they have what we call compromat?
So a lot of people are watching this from a distance. They have seen the pace quicken here, it seems like, certainly since the midterms. We know that there's still much ahead. Jerome Corsi is a conspiracy theorist who said he believes he is going to be indicted. An ally of his, a friend of the president's, a man by the name of Roger Stone, is concerned that he's in the crosshairs as well. What should we anticipate? What comes next here?
The investigation continues. For those who think that Mueller might be wrapping up, I point to some evidence that he might not be. And those two pieces of evidence are redactions and sealed documents. If you look at the Michael Flynn sentencing memorandum,
came out this week,
it is replete with redactions. That tells us that the special counsel's office and the government, the prosecutors, are concerned about compromising a future or current investigation or a matter. So for that reason, they make this stuff secret. That tells me that there's still work to be done, and the government, having handled a lot of these cases, they move at their own pace. They will be finished when they feel like being finished.
We got a ways to go, perhaps. Danny Cevallos, thanks, Danny, very much.
Thank you.